Welcome to Sport Media and Tech. I am Keel Blake. On this episode, Mark Hotchkin and I talk with incredible professionals who have all experienced the world of tennis from very unique perspectives. We talk a milestone for women in sports, athlete performance data, and the social aspect of play ratings for amateurs. I'm Anne Worcester, from President of Universal Tennis. How are you doing?
Good morning. I'm doing great. Happy to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, so glad you could join us. I just love how you shared your passion for spending time with students prior to us recording. So thanks so much. We also have Luke Jensen, head coach at New York Empire. How are you doing?
Very good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Can't wait to hear your story. The students will hear it in a moment here, but you have an incredible story in the world of tennis and a lot of knowledge to share. And we also have Sandy Mittleman, coach at Mittleman Tennis, and also involved in many other things, sports tech and academy related. Yeah, glad you're here, Sandy. So, one of the first questions that we ask every podcast is just, how did you get your start in sport and media and or tech?
Well, I guess I'll jump in first. I went to Duke University. I majored in economics. There was no business major. There was no sports business, no sports marketing. It was back in the dark ages. Maybe that's why. And I was a senior and very confused about what I wanted to do. I was interviewing on Wall Street, thinking about the Peace Corps and everything in between. And when I went to Duke, I thought about trying out for the tennis team, but I decided not to because I didn't want to spend 80 hours a week traveling and training and playing. So for 4 years, I organized cultural events, the plays, the concerts, the movies, the speakers. So when I was really confused as a college senior, this guy walked up to me on the quad and he said, "I'm Todd McCormick. I know what you do here at Duke, and I think you'd be fantastic for my father's company, IMG." I said, "What's IMG?" He said, "Sports marketing." I said, "What's sports marketing?" So anyway, one thing led to another. And after a stint working as an au pair in Spain so I could improve my Spanish, I bumped into Todd again, and he connected me with his father. And the only entry-level opening in the whole company was racket sports. And of course, I'd come from a tennis family. Tennis was in my blood. My parents played. My parents taught tennis as a second profession. So off I went. I worked answering the phones and taking ticket orders with my Duke honors degree. My friends thought I was crazy. And within a week, I knew I'd found my niche in life. In my love for event marketing and my love for tennis all in one. And here I am 35 years later, still in professional tennis, now community tennis and technology. More on that later.
So my name's Luke Jensen, and I'm a former professional tennis player and coach at various levels, but I've had a lifetime in sports. My life coaches, were phys ed teachers in a very small town in Michigan, and I played all the sports. I have a younger brother and 2 sisters, and sports was always in our daily routine and playing all different sports. And my dad was a high school football coach and tennis coach at the same time, so it was a very unique combination. And my mom, who was a high school gymnastics coach when Title IX in 1973 really started hitting big time. And so I grew up in some very unique gymnasiums, courts, fields, around tremendous coaching and tremendous skill building and character building through sports. And so around 13 or 14, when I was choosing, which sport to really go to, when you really had to specialize between football, basketball, or whatever, tennis was the one that really grabbed me and my family, because it was the one that was so inclusive, where my sisters could play the same tournament that my brother and I could play, and my grandparents could play the same tournaments my parents could play. And so we do these family outings to Detroit and Chicago, and coming from a town of 8,000, going to big cities like that, other sports really didn't provide that for the entire family. And tennis was the one that could take us globally. So the first time I even left home to go really anywhere overseas was because of tennis. And I went to Europe, and it was was an amazing trip, and I got to meet different people and see different cultures, and other sports didn't do that. And as you just, start marching through, you start building your ranking, you start working a little bit harder, you get really good coaching behind you. I was playing the Nationals in Kalamazoo, which is the biggest junior tournament for junior boys in the world. The Kalamazoo Nationals, from John McEnroe played it, Jimmy Connors, Rod Laver even played it. And so I think it was 1984, I was playing it, and they needed an analyst to cover the boys final. And because I was a local kid from Michigan, I was given the seat to call a match and to sit down there. And something about that was really cool. And the next year I entered as a freshman into Southern Cal. And the first class I signed up for was broadcast journalism, and to go and be in front of the camera, behind the camera, to edit pieces, to go into the video room and figure out what the next plan of attack, and doing not just sporting events, but also, working on subjects in the community. And Southern Cal is in downtown LA, and that's during the riots with Rodney King and all those types of things. And to be part of that was really interesting. Right after that, I turned professional and played on the circuit forever. And then in 1994, while I was playing, ESPN was looking for an analyst who was in the locker room, who was still playing. I was the only one of like 1,000 players that had any type of broadcast journalism experience. And so my very first match was 1984 Paris Indoor. And I had the unbelievable honor to work with Mary Carrillo calling the Paris Indoor. And then things just got rolling. My tennis was taking off. I'd won a French Open title in the mid-90s with my brother Murphy, and brought me into a couple of tournaments to rock her tennis world. And that was a lot of fun. And I just finished the US Open working with ESPN, DirecTV, and the USTA on their world feed, and called the tiebreaker in the fifth with the men's finals. So tennis has been extremely amazing to myself, my family, and I'm still going for it just because of the education at Southern Cal beyond the court, beyond tennis. And I'm just very grateful for the opportunity.
Luke, I'm a fellow Michigan guy over here. And so just hearing your story, even though I know your background being from Michigan, playing tennis, just gives me goosebumps. And I think Mark has a connection with you as well, actually, in your path.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember you coached with Syracuse, right? When I was the Big East. So yeah, I think our paths must have crossed at some point.
That's right. That's right. That was some good times right before Syracuse entered the ACC.
Yeah, I remember that very well.
We never talked about this, but I'm a Cuse parent. My daughter just graduated she sort of graduated in May from Syracuse, from the Newhouse School of Communication.
Yeah.
That's
So
awesome.
Newhouse 3. Yeah, they have better technology than ESPN. That's a great school there. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Sandy, tell us a little about your story.
Sure. So I'm Sandy Mittleman. I appreciate being a part of this great panel, and most importantly, I appreciate you guys all having me and coming on. I come from Rochester, New York, which a lot of people don't know. And interestingly enough, you talk about, Anne mentioned Syracuse. Luke obviously was a coach at Syracuse. And interestingly enough about Syracuse is that when I was a kid, all I ever wanted to do was go to Syracuse University to go to the Newhouse School of Communications. I have 3 family members that graduated from Syracuse. And I spent a lot of time there as a kid playing tournaments, just being around, going to the games, football, basketball. So Syracuse is in the blood. But how I got involved and started in tennis is kind of interesting. I started off playing golf because my father and uncle are very good golfers. And I was playing golf long before I touched a tennis racket. My only problem with golf was that I didn't have the patience for it. So, when I was supposed to get a birdie, I really wanted a birdie. If I didn't get it, I got really not so happy. So basically after a while, I was given the opportunity to get a racket in my hand. I remember it like it was yesterday. Went to a wall with a ball, had no court, had no people, had no coaching. And the first time I ever touched the racket, I hit the ball on the wall for 3 hours without stopping, and I was basically hooked. And so, so that was like when I was about 9.5 or 10, and it just kind of got me, and I just felt a connection to it. And I was just telling the story to somebody the other day. I actually can't remember the first time I ever had coaching. Everything basically that I ever sort of learned with grips and technique, I basically just had from day one. And, you know, I don't think I grew up in the traditional sense where, you know, you're that kid in that, you know, small area of tennis in the Northeast where I want to be the best in the world. It was never even a thought in my head. I was just playing because I always loved it and I just wanted more of it. And then it got to a point where, you know, the whole college thing came up and where are you going to go and what are you going to do? And I wasn't Mr. Academics. I wasn't into academics. I wasn't the guy that was going to like go to the biggest school and, you know, rock it out with all A's. And I wasn't going to the Dukes or anything like that. I had Syracuse in my mind, but the reason why I chose not to go there, ironically, was I found out they had no men's tennis team. And so when I found that out, I was like, okay, don't want to go there because I've been in the cold all my life. Let's get out of here. But then interestingly enough, when I was not sure what I was going to do and where I was going to go, because I was kind of late in the decision, I ironically ended up, through some research from family, going to Ferris State University in Michigan because of their tennis management program. So it was like sort of a little bit of a last resort. Okay, tennis management, let's go. So I went to Michigan of all places. Nothing wrong with Michigan, Luke, don't worry. Okay. But yeah, so I went there. Wasn't very happy after a year. The weather was brutal. The program was great, but I wasn't happy. So I was given the opportunity to move to Florida, came down here, and then had a little bit of some personal stuff going on. And so when it came time to make a decision sort of career-wise, interestingly enough, you talk about sort of circumstance and how things transform. I was trying to figure stuff out in 1990. I was a little bit like, okay, where am I going? What am I doing? I never thought about playing professional tennis. Didn't know if I was good enough. Didn't know any of that. I just knew I could play, but I didn't really have anybody saying, hey, you could be good if you do this. Nobody was saying that to me. So I was trying to figure it out. And we had a family friend who Luke and Anne may know, I'm not sure. His name is Murph Klauber, who was best friends with Nick Bollettieri. And so Nick owed Murph a favor and I became the favor. So I moved down got a phone call from Nick Bollettieri late 1990, and December 12th of 91, I moved to Nick's Academy and everything changed. I saw everything different. I saw tennis different. I saw the world different and all those things. And so long story about me is I quit playing because I was already 21 at the time. And Nick gave me a job coaching, and then the whole thing just sort of took off because I was around really good players that were super competitive, super ambitious. And I was like, wow, this is interesting. This is a world I didn't know anything about. And so I got opportunities, you know, I got opportunity with this player, with that player, and things just started rolling from there and traveling the world and, you know, meeting a lot of people. And, you know, fast forward to part of the reason why Keel, you and I connected a little bit was, you know, about 10 years ago, through some friends, I got connected to the tech space and also a little bit the media space. And I'm very well connected in Israel. And so all these companies, these tech companies started coming to me through friends of mine in Israel, everybody like, oh, how do we get business in North America? How do we get market share? You know, how do we raise money? Like all this stuff started happening. So I've been doing a lot of that over the past 10 years. Intertwined with coaching, working on some marketing projects with Luke. We worked on a variety of projects together. He's been a huge advocate for me. And then, in recent times, Anne and I crossed paths again, and I reached out to her in the pandemic, and we hadn't talked in a really long time. I don't remember how long it was years. She was the last time we talked. Anne was, I think still, if I remember correctly, the tournament director in New Haven. It was the last time we actually had a conversation. So it's been a long time, but nevertheless, you know, we're in a crazy world, but, you know, I do a lot of different things, as you mentioned. Coaching is one, but heavily involved in business development, working with companies to develop their market share. And, you know, and a lot of it is in the tech space. So that's where I find myself and doing a lot of consulting work and event management. And yeah, super excited to be a part of this panel and talk about it.
Yeah, that's great. Appreciate hearing kind of everybody's backstory. It's really interesting how people, you know, get to where they are now. First thing I wanted to talk about a little bit that we kind of circled as a topic was the universal tennis rating, which is powered by Oracle. It's really an interesting example of where tech and sport collide. So Maybe start with Anne, kind of tell us a little bit about what UTR is, and then for Luke and Sandy, maybe jump in and afterwards and say how you utilize it or what it's meant for you in the teaching and coaching side of things.
I'm happy to do that. And when Keel asked, how did you get your start in sports? I took him very literally and just talked about the beginning. But after that fortuitous start with IMG, answering the phones and taking ticket orders, I worked on the tournament side, and then got to go to Spain and work on event marketing with Manolo Santana. Also, thanks to IMG, came back, worked for Virginia Slims as the director of worldwide operations when they were the global sponsor of the tour. So I got to travel the world, use my Spanish, and learn event marketing from the best in the business. And then became the managing director of the Women's Tennis Council, which was the then governing body of the game, with players, tournaments, Grand Slams, and ITF at the same table. And then when the Women's Tennis Council and the Player Association integrated, I became the first CEO of the WTA Tour. And I think they tell me the first female CEO of any major sports organizations back in 1994. So that was wild and crazy for all kinds of reasons, and could talk about that for another podcast. But then I wanted to have kids, and I couldn't be traveling the world. And even when I was home, I was completely on call. And so I didn't renew my contract, and I was very lucky. And women's tennis came to Connecticut. And as Luke and Sandy have mentioned, I was the tournament director of the New Haven events, which was a men's event and a women's event, and then a combined ATP WTA event for a while, for 21 years while I raised my kids. So I drove up and down I-95 feeling like my hair was on fire, being a working mom, but it was really, really, really great opportunity. And we worked very hard to leverage pro tennis to build community tennis. And
yeah.
That could be another podcast, Keel.
And I'm curious, I know we're going to talk about UTR and jump into that, but before we do, it's the 50-year anniversary. You have Billie Jean King behind you. Could you just share from your perspective, you've been along, for this journey. Could you just share a little bit what that means with the 50-year anniversary and the photo that was just taken and just, your experience?
Yeah, I mean, the original 9 group of tennis players, Billie Jean King, Rosie Casals, Christy Pigeon, there's 9 players who in 1970 realized they were getting paid a fraction of what the men were being paid. Nothing was getting better anytime soon. And they had the courage to defect from what was then the tour and sign an agreement with Gladys Hellman, who was this entrepreneur in Houston, to play the Virginia Slims Invitational in Houston. And they signed for $1. It was a contract they signed with $1. And there's this very famous photo of the original 9 sitting holding their $1 bill. And then, of course, Gladys came back to them and said, okay, well, you're not going to believe this. I found a sponsor. And they said, great, who? And she said, Virginia Slims. And it was the first time any corporation, it was, the girls were like, what do you mean, a cigarette? We don't smoke. I don't get it. But it was the first time any corporation had stepped up to sponsor any women's sport anywhere in the world. And Philip Morris, of course, became, the Virginia Slims Tour. And those players were the pioneers, and they forged a path for the players of today. And as I was saying before we started, Billie Jean King and these others, it's not just that they were pioneers for women's tennis players and women's tennis executives like me. They led the way for all of women's sports, for equality in women's sports, and women in the world, women in the workplace. We still have a lot of work to do. There's, very, very small, I think there's, 7% of CEOs are women. We gotta work on that. 20% of women in politics of elected officials are women. So we got lots of work to do. But we wouldn't be where we are today without Billie Jean King and the original 9, and many other women who have worked hard for equality since then. Martina Navratilova, Venus Williams, getting equal prize money at the Grand Slams. We stand on their shoulders, and I could not be more grateful. And I love all this celebration of the 50th anniversary to remind us all that we stand on their shoulders. So now you want me to talk about UTR after that? Okay.
Hard to follow.
My other passion in life. So UTR is the most accurate global rating system in the whole wide world, and it rates everybody on the same 16-point scale, regardless of your age, your gender, your nationality, or your socioeconomic background. The algorithm is super accurate and objective because it takes into consideration 3 things: the strength of your opponent, the percentage of games you win, not just win or lose in most, which is how a points per round tournament is played. And third, recency, up to 30 matches in the last 12 months, which we've now extended to 15 months because of the pandemic shutdown for 3 months. So the company is called Universal Tennis, and our mission is to make tennis more affordable, accessible, and fun for everyone, regardless of age, gender, socioeconomic background, and nationality. And basically, our goal is to go into every locale, and it's about changing the paradigm away from gender, away from age, to level-based play. Because all the research shows that when somebody wants to go out and play a great game of tennis, they want to play somebody more or less at their same level. And while the rating, UTR, Universal Tennis Rating, has a 10+ year history, it was actually founded by college coaches in Virginia because they needed a global objective rating to recruit, because they didn't have the time or the money to travel around the world. And I know we're going to come back to that, the importance of this for coaches. But ever since Mark Leschly, our CEO, bought the company 2.5 years ago, together with partners like Roger Federer and Team 8, Novak Djokovic, Tennis Channel, Tennis Australia. Oracle is the sponsor of the rating. We always say we feel like we're in very, very good company. But ever since this new sort of ownership, we have built an entire engagement platform with tools and technologies for high school play, for college play, for clubs of all shapes and sizes, for academies and NJTLs, all kinds of inner city tennis programs. And if you look at the numbers really speak for themselves. There are some 2.2 million profiles on the platform, with 18 million results counting towards the algorithm, which come from 200 countries. And if you add up all the events being played on the UTR platform, high school, club, academy, college, there are 1,500 events played every single month on the UTR platform. And that number has tripled since I joined the company a month ago. So the growth has been just exponential. And basically our philosophy, once again, is to introduce level-based play into local communities and make it much easier for players to find opportunities to play, which is ultimately what's going to grow the game. So you hear me talking about local, local, local. We've been talking about this local tennis ecosystem for forever. But fast forward to COVID and to the global shutdown, now everybody agrees that local tennis is the new normal. And tighter pocketbooks is the new normal. So we also need to be sensitive to that. So when we're talking to clubs of all shapes and sizes and coaches and everyone about coming onto the platform, we are living in trying times. There is no doubt about it. And every day things are evolving, and sometimes we feel like it's standing in quicksand. And it's essential that all events are played by local health and safety guidelines for sure. That said, when we are feeling anxiety. And when we are in times of anxiety, we all need to do things that are good for our mind, body, and spirit. And that's tennis, right? And so how lucky we are that tennis is inherent social distancing, and tennis is appearing at the top of all these safety lists as the least likely place to catch the virus. So we are simply trying to give everyone the tools and the technologies to get started when it's safe to do so in a local market. So that's who we are.
Yeah, and I love that explanation, and I can share firsthand. I am the living, breathing example of what you're talking about. I grew up playing tennis from age 4 on. I played all the way through high school, and then I played club tennis in college, and then as I got into professional life and that it became a little less consistent at hitting, and that started playing a lot of basketball, or I kept playing a lot of basketball. But then when COVID hit, I said I can't go out and play basketball with 25 people that I don't know, when you're rubbing bodies and getting that close right now. That's just. But I said, you know what? I love tennis. I can still play tennis. So I wasn't playing enough to be on UTR prior to COVID, at least in this short segment. But now I am. And so what you share, coming in, that's something that would be really helpful, even for an amateur, right? Going in, because it is, you're so correct when you're saying, and spot on, you want to go out and find people of similar level to be able to play with, so you both can be competitive and have fun and help each other's game grow. Speaking of game growth, we have 2 incredible coaches here. So I'm curious, why is UTR so important for coaches? And we could talk about all the other segments too, like academies, clubs, colleges, high school, tournaments, and et cetera.
Well, I have a very unique relationship with UTR. I would say 10, 15 years ago, Daryl Cummings from Old Dominion University, when he was the head coach there, I was doing an event with my brother, a special event down at Virginia Beach, Virginia, and Norfolk, basically. And he had, he and a bunch of other coaches talking about this UTR and how, the USTA rankings really doesn't translate anywhere else in the world. And the ITF, you got to be able to spend a lot of money, and trying to find the best player from Lithuania. How do they rank against the best player from the state of Georgia, or vice versa? And so they had this UTR concept. And then I would say about 5 years after that or so, I was a director at this resort in Sea Island. And I spoke with Dave Fish, who was at that time the head coach at Harvard University, and worked with James Blake and a bunch of great players. And was really kind of, UTR was kind of evolving into, this great concept that was Daryl Cummings was talking about, of, how all these coaches, male and female, could really look at this UTR rating system, and you couldn't cheat it, you couldn't jump it. It was really a basis where, okay, if you had a certain UTR, you could compete in our conference. You could compete on a national level. And it was just kind of, an easy way to kind of decipher who's good and who could contribute to your team at the level you needed. And then a few years after that, I was given the opportunity to be the director of racket sports at the historic Westside Tennis Club in Forest Hills, where the very first U.S. Open was, over 100 and some years old, and grass courts, clay courts, and everything. And I had an opportunity to work with Anne and her crew on UTR at really where it's really evolving at the community level. Even though I was a club in the New York area, I had competition from the John McEnroe Tennis Academy, from the National Tennis Center, where the U.S. Open is now, and all these other academies and things and facilities. But UTR was a place where I have over 1,000 members, but members that had their own games, their own level, their own level in which they felt they were. They thought they were an A player, when actually they were kind of like a C player. And so working with UTR and their entire team that helped us develop these UTR events. And for the first time, we had juniors seeking out 70-year-olds because it was their UTR's match, and kids would go up to the dining room and go, Mrs. Jones, what's your UTR? And educating Mrs. Jones, who's like 70, I'm a 4 UTR. And then this little Tommy, Can we play? And drag Mrs. Jones out of the dining room and go play on the grass court, on the clay court. And then they'd self-report their UTR and everything like that. And all of a sudden, this historic club of like 1,000, all of a sudden began to really come together. It was really our glue at the club, and so many events and people in the community who weren't members of the West Side Tennis Club because it was too exclusive or too snooty or too historic, finally got to come in because of UTR events and get an experience in the 14,000 seat stadium where Arthur Ashe played, where Althea Gibson 70 years ago broke the color barrier in tennis, and all these historic events. It's really like going to Wimbledon to play an event, and you're just like, you know, a club player or a community player. And so UTR in my life has been huge because I've seen it evolve from its early beginnings to the power in which Anne was talking about now.
We brag about Luke all the time because he is one of our most passionate experts on UTR. But it's not just tennis and it's not just UTR. He saw the value in bringing technology to a club that probably barely understood what technology was. And he used technology in a very user-friendly way. He crawled before he walked, before he ran. And this is and everyone thinks, oh, UTR is all about competitive juniors and college coaches. The average age at Westside Tennis Club is 55 years old, or 55 years young, I like to say.
Yeah.
So he recognized all this, and in a very short period of time, came in and completely changed the culture of the club and made it much more social around, around UTR, around level-based play. And he tells the story that he had 2 backdoor neighbors who didn't even know they played at the same club because there was so little social play. And once he introduced UTR events and level-based play, they became best friends. So I just love that sort of cultural shift. And I also love that it equalizes and democratizes and allows, you know, others to experience tennis, because sometimes we have the reputation of being a bit elite in tennis.
Anne, I love you sharing about the social aspect of it, but I do have a serious question for you. Am I allowed to have a UTR account for my forehand and serve, and then a separate account for my backhand?
Definitely not.
Yeah.
I don't have to call my data and analytics expert to answer that question.
Yeah, all right. So Sandy.
You can have separate singles from your doubles.
Okay.
But that's where I draw the line.
Yeah. Okay. There we go. I like that. Thank you. I didn't know that. I needed to know that. So Sandy, how has UTR helped you along the way?
I myself, for years been trying to help kids from around the world get into school, and done it pretty successfully over the years. But there's always been this sort of talking point, right? Which is, wherever you come from in the world, oh, sure, what's your level, what's your ranking, right? And it's like, it doesn't matter where you come from, it's always some different number. So it'd be like, okay, I got to see you on video. Doesn't matter what the number you give me is, what the ranking is. I got to see you on video, and I'll do the eye test, right? I'll do the eye test because my eyes don't usually get it wrong. But then over the years, I started hearing about the UTR, like many people have, and then saw it on the Tennis Channel a little bit over the years, and just heard different conversations about it. And as I got to know it a little bit, I'm like, listen, this sort of takes me back in time, right? Because when I was growing up, Luke just mentioned it, like a kid with an adult, right? When does that ever happen at a club, right? Kids want to be with kids, adults want to be with adults because, age and all that. I played with so many adults when I was a kid. As long as you can play and the levels are equal, more or less, people were all in, right? There was no separation. So when I came across UTR and then, found out a little bit about who was behind it, and then sort of what the evolution of it was, I just realized, and then had a few conversations along the way with Anne about it. I just realized, look, for me, this just makes sense in every way, right? It's like bringing people together, male and female. There's no conversation. You're at the same level. All you really want to do is play tennis and compete and have a great, and have a great time doing it. I mean, for me, it's like the closest thing to a no-brainer you can find, right? There's no questions. There's no wondering. There's no, oh, well, if my kid doesn't fit because that kid's ranking is this or whatever it might be, there's no conversation. And one of the things that, I'll just share this real quick. One of the things that I like about it is that, you know, it takes a lot of thought out of everything, right? Because you just know if my rating is 7, okay, and your rating is 7, there's no questions. You don't have to say, oh, well, I'm from here and you're from there, so 7 might not be the same thing or whatever it might be. So I just feel like in that respect, for any coach anywhere at any club in any academy, it serves a huge value proposition in bringing people together, growing the game, getting people on the courts, competing, having a good time. And I think that inevitably, I don't know, I can't speak on behalf of Anne or Luke, and nor would I want to, but I feel like that's been a large part of what's been missing at the game, which is just getting people on the courts, being inclusive, having a good time, wanting to be out there, wanting to be social, wanting to play and compete and have fun, but realize you're with people of the same, the same level and skill set. And then everybody's going to want to keep coming back.
Keel, to jump in on that, at the club, one of the things that we found was when they started competing, they hated losing, which meant we got more lessons for our pros. Players were jumping into more clinics than they did before. Parents were getting their kids because the kids wanted to take more classes and more days in the junior, basically the tennis school, because they hated their level of play because they were losing to their, fellow, club member, or they were losing these UTR events, because we were having 2 UTR events a week, one on grass in the summer and then another one on clay. So we used all of our different facilities and surfaces. But boy, the business model really jumped, because when you compete and you're really a true competitor, you don't like your standard, you are going to go to your pro and take more lessons. You are going to jump in more clinics and engage more in the club. And really the job of the club was to keep people there. And if they're there, they're going to eat, they're going to hang out, and they're going to drink. Helps the business model.
Yeah, Luke, to your point, so it's been a decade, but I used to teach, and I used to spend a lot of time with my tournament players looking up all their scores and literally just going and trying to find and documenting what they did, their games and all that, so I could sit down and talk to them. And to have a tool that just gives all that instantaneously would have saved me so much time. So that's a really great point that you bring up in terms of the whole club ecosystem. Appreciate it.
Yeah, we'd have match play, and I'd have the computer right there, and they'd come off of their match, and I'd log in and basically submit their score right there, and they'd see it happen right away. And then I want to play so and so because they're UTR this, and it was just bananas having 30, 40 members, adults, juniors, just on match play, singles and doubles, and they're just rushing to get their score inputted and then rushing to go back out and play again.
I'm taking notes, Luke. This is even more good fodder. I love, because this is great sort of best practices to share with other clubs. There's nothing like the here and now, right? It kind of loses sizzle if you think about doing it a couple days later. It's like the golf gin. It's the tennis version of golf gin. Come off the course and post your score. Yeah, I mean, we say that UTR is the ability to run unlimited events at a moment's notice, flexible format of your choosing, and you can charge whatever is appropriate for your given situation. So if you take a step back to Luke's point, it allows clubs to increase tennis participation, increase revenue, and improve the player experience. And what's more important than that for any place that wants to host events and grow tennis?
And what do we really need to do in our sport is get the families engaged once again. So I can take a UTR event and I could honestly have the entire family playing. Mom and dad, grandpa and grandma, and the kiddos, and they're all playing. They may not play against each other, but they're going to play a UTR that's right in their wheelhouse. And it was just a huge, glue factor for us to unite everybody.
Love it.
Yeah, so many interesting angles to it. It reminds me a little bit of, like a golf handicap where you can kind of compare yourself. Obviously, I bet UTR is probably a little bit easier, a little bit harder to fudge than some of the handicaps that I know, but it should be a little, it definitely helps, when you're matching up with somebody, and definitely can see where that comes in.
Well, Mark, the biggest thing real quick on that is one of the biggest things at the club, at the Westside Tennis Club historically, is the club championships. And so people, the members would join to win their club championship, whether it's a B level, C level. And when I got there, they seeded based on 12 months before. Well, if Sally had a twisted ankle and didn't play for 6 months, she maybe not be at the same level. Or, Tommy has improved a bunch, but they're going on Tommy's result from last year's club championship. I was basically telling all 1,000 members, if you want to play the club championships, you have to get your UTR ranking up, because that's how we seed and that's how we play everybody. It's the same thing. You can't play the golf club championship unless you have a handicap, and you report your score after every round. It's the same thing we use UTR for at the Westside Tennis Club.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's very cool. Want to switch gears really quick to the ongoing stuff with COVID-19. You kind of alluded to it a little bit earlier, its impact on tennis, and obviously there being some positives to getting people out there and playing, because inherently socially distanced. That obviously comes with quite a number of other challenges that come up, whether that's having fans at tournaments or financial constraints that were also brought up. But curious a little bit about what you think the pandemic has done so far for the sport of tennis and the industry. Then maybe what might change moving forward. How do we get back to something resembling normal? So I guess we'll start with Anne.
As I mentioned, the positive is that tennis is inherent social distancing. Some clubs are allowing doubles. Some clubs are only allowing singles, depending on where you are in the country. All clubs have very strict policies. They've taken out the furniture in their, lobby, for example, so that there's no encouraging social gathering. Players have to, they're only renting or using every other court. Players have to arrive 5 minutes before their court time, have to leave 5 minutes after. So we're really missing the social element of tennis, of course, but this is how we are responsibly abiding by local and state health and safety protocols. And what clubs love about UTR and any organizers anywhere is that you can run a match play of 8 players. That's how Luke started at Westside. You can run a match play of 8 players. You can socially distance the courts. You make sure everybody's arriving and departing at appropriate times. So, with UTR, and the whole reason we really wanted to be a part of bringing back pro tennis. We're a technology company. We're not a pro tennis event company. But the reason we wanted to stage the UTR Pro Match Series in West Palm Beach together with Tennis Channel in May, it was all about launching our vision for how tennis can be played locally and safely with one-on-one match play. And you can play locally, and it counts towards a global rating. So there's no other rating that could, that you can say that about. So we have lots and lots of examples on myutr.com of safe, social distancing, COVID-friendly events. Taylor Dent down in Texas has done a great job. He started in late May. And in his event description, he lays out all the rules, and he says, and if anyone who doesn't abide by these health and safety protocols will be withdrawn from the tournament. So by and large, our organizers have been vigilant about their local health and safety protocols. And it might be a while before we see a 32 draw, it might be, and the other thing that's really taken off is that we just announced a whole Flex League series in major markets across the country. We have a Flex League coordinator, and he or she basically finds local players and assigns them matches, and they have to play 2 matches in 1 week, and they report scores, and the Flex League coordinator inputs the scores. But it's a safe and local way to play tennis. So we've just tried to be completely aware of the challenges and pivot to playing tennis in a local and safe manner. So, but it has a lot to do with the fact that tennis is inherently social distant, and it's appearing on these safety lists as one of the least likely ways to contract the virus. I mean, here in New York, Governor Cuomo, when New York was the epicenter of the coronavirus, and one of the first stages of reopening, I think it was May 15th, was safe recreational activities like tennis. That was his example. So, in most places, in many places, that's been very helpful and wonderful. And there's still cities who, are struggling, and, indoor courts are not yet open, or you have to wear a mask when you play. So, but thankfully those are the exception and not the rule right now.
And to build on that, at the Westside Tennis Club, May 15th, they did open. And what was ironic was there are 38 courts there in different capacities. Hard courts, we got the stadium, clay courts, grass courts. So they were right away social distancing. You couldn't use the locker rooms. You couldn't be in the clubhouse. There's, real secure protocols for safety, but people weren't traveling. And the business side of it was amazing, because for the first time there were staycations. No one was traveling to Europe. No one was traveling, with their family truckster across the country. They weren't going to camps. They were staying right there. And it was the best season in 125 years for summer junior camp at the Westside Tennis Club. Their numbers were bonanza. And it was, everybody was following protocol. Even now, the juniors are not allowed to pick up the tennis balls. The pros have to go and they pick up the tennis balls, where the kids social distance along the fence in their little stations and their little pods. So the business model, if you're safe and the parents feel the kids are safe, and no positive tests in their little mini bubble. And I was very fortunate to be in the World Team Tennis bubble at the Greenbrier Tennis Club. So that was 3 months at a resort in a bubble, and no positive tests there. And then it just got out of the US Open, which was another very stringent. I'm talking, there were like COVID police going around if you didn't have your mask on and things, and no positive tests. So, and that was 5,000 people in this little bubble. And you could go from the hotel to your specific hotel to your certain station at the National Tennis Center. So you couldn't, I couldn't go to the players lounge because I didn't have a certain level of clearance and things, taking a test every 4 days. But it's just amazing how in the tennis world, whether it's the kids, the parents, or the professional tennis players, there was such a great buy-in because everybody was grateful to get back to some normalcy.
Yeah, no, I have to say that I just sent the USTA a love note last night. Good for them. They, against all odds, with so many obstacles and so many critics, they pulled off something that most people thought that they couldn't. And they worked 24/7 since COVID hit to figure out how to pull it off and stage this global show in a responsible way. And there were unrelated to COVID, unfortunate incidents, as we all know. That's another podcast. But I give them so much credit for taking the risk and having the courage to go through with it against all odds. Would have been a lot easier to cancel it.
Mm-hmm.
And I wish Roland Garros all good things, which is happening in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're getting close to our time here, and so what I want to ask as we wrap up is we have a tradition of ending the podcast by having each speaker look right into the camera and share words of advice for students. So I'm going to ask you to kind of roll into this, where should students be looking for opportunities in the game of tennis to work? Where should, what skill sets are needed for students? And then what advice would you have? So we'll go down the line, Anne, Luke, and Sandy, and we'll exit out from there.
Wow. Well, first of all, it's not an easy time to be looking for a job, but I have always recommended to students, to graduates interested in sports marketing, that if it's possible to volunteer or work below your market value, now is the time to do so before you have a mortgage to pay for and a family to support. My first job, answering the phones and taking ticket orders at a tennis tournament in Boston, I made $250 a week with no benefits and no job security. My friends all thought I was crazy. Now they say we were crazy because we're the happiest of all of us. But so number one, take a risk if you can afford to do so. And as it relates to just career advice, be willing to slog in the trenches, as my father would say. Of course, be hardworking and all the obvious things, but be willing to slog in the trenches. And no job is beneath you. That said, know your value. Especially if you're a woman, know your value and never ever apologize for ambition.
That's awesome. I love it. I always go to Billie Jean King. Always bet on yourself and you'll never lose.
I love that.
To me, if you get there first, every day at work, you get there first and you make sure that you're asking the right questions to your superiors. What do you need me to do today to move the organizational forward? And are you the last one to leave? Are you the first one there and the last one to leave? Are you taking notes? Are you learning every single day in a growth mindset? Because if you're doing what everybody else is doing, they don't really need you. But if you provide something that's so unique and so passionate that they have to have you in their organization, when they have to make tough decisions, who do we keep, who do we let go? Are you bringing additional value to the company? And it doesn't matter, where you come from. It doesn't matter. And if you can add value, you're going to win. And if you show that you're willing to do anything at any time, and you are always on call, ready to help the organization win, you're going to be in that organization. You're going to be amazed how maybe it doesn't pay off on this certain job, but when you jump to the next job and you jump to the next job, all this value you've picked up along the way because you have this growth mindset that you're going to be running your own organization. You're going to say, instead of me working for somebody, I want to work for myself. And you'll take it to the next level with all this experience and all this growth mindset. And you'll be able to call on the people that you worked for wisdom. So I get a chance to call Sandy and call Anne and call Billie Jean King and call the greats in the industry if I have a problem and I seek wisdom. So always be looking for that next level of education that can move your life forward.
Hear, hear. Go be outstanding and know that you deserve recognition and compensation,
Yeah, to echo both Anne and Luke's points, I've always had one philosophy since I started in the business, because I sort of came up in a little bit different way in my mind. Look for opportunity, say yes, and why not? Don't question it, dive right into it, work harder than everybody else around you, and be ready to do things that other people aren't. For me, it's very simple. If you have that attitude and mentality every day when you wake up, I'm a big believer that, for me, that mentality comes from people in the startup world, right? Thinking they've got something better, they can add value somewhere, and don't come with excuses, come with solutions.
That is a wrap. I'm so glad that Luke mentioned Billie Jean King's quote. Join us next episode when we connect with Chris Stennert, CEO of Dugout Mugs, where he talks about what it takes to bet on yourself in performance marketing.